Christian lawmaker says teachers should be allowed to hit students with disabilities. This next segment outlines exactly what happens when religion enters government, but more specifically, when Christianity enters government. The state of Oklahoma, where it is legal for teachers to beat students, is revising its policy to also include abusing children with disabilities, which it currently cannot do. Christian Republican lawmakers are citing the Bible to justify a teacher's a teacher's need to treat children with violence, quoting multiple Bible verses to include teachings from Jesus. Republicans, who hold overwhelming majorities in both the Oklahoma State Senate and House of Representatives, are supporting legislation that takes a parent's right away to choose if their disabled children can be physically disciplined. This is not just some traditional approach to discipline. Heck, it's not even just an attack on children. If we're being truthful, which we always are on the nonprofits, this is what happens when Christianity enters government. The tools of the state, including finances, institutions, infrastructure, etc., are used against the people. It always starts with attacking the kids, but it will result, if unchecked, with mass oppression and human sacrifice. We know that from looking into church history or even current events. This story is from The Friendly Atheist by Hemant Mehta on April 25th, 2024. Kelly.
Yeah.
Do they have to smack these kids around? What is happening?
Of course they do. Of course they have to smack these kids around. They got learning disabilities. Don't you understand? You have to beat everything into their heads. That's the best way to teach children that have trouble reasoning. Holy fuck, this medieval mentality is fucking appalling. I have a real problem with this because I don't think anybody should hit kids. I raised 2 kids. They're wonderful adults. There are so many tools you can use with kids. They have short attention spans. They don't know anything about the world. You can use those 2 things like to your advantage all the time. There's no reason to torture children.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear that you went a lifetime being a great father, Kelly, and raising your children without violence. You know, my wife and I have already talked about this. I mean, we are prepared. I'm a father. Somebody ever puts their hands on my kids, that's the day I go to jail. It's already been planned out. We've got, you know, we have to be prepared. Jason, as a father, please give me your reaction.
I mean, y'all know me. It's no mystery. Anybody knows me knows that I've been training, fighting MMA and doing jiu-jitsu for almost 20 years. And my family knows it's the same thing. You'd be bailing me out. And I'm not advocating for violence. No one in the AC, don't speak for the ACA. But somebody harms my kid, you know, I'm gonna do real bad things that I won't regret. My kid also has some special education needs. And again, like Kelly, I've never hit my kid once. I have no need to. Luckily, they go to the gym and got plenty of peers and cohorts that they can fight, you know, and get it out. I just think it's repulsive to me. A lot of times, and it's so interesting because you see the people promoting this shit are these like fucking fake ass alpha male type of misogynistic, fucking spare the rod, spoil the child type people. And I'll tell you, man, I see plenty of people with that mentality try to come in the gym and act like tough guys. They don't last. They get schooled by some nerdy math major, you know, by some queer guy like me laying on them, rubbing my fucking sweaty body on them while I beat some progressivism into them. It's just disgusting to me. You know, I think it's a weak thing perpetuated by weak people to break down people who could potentially be strong and usurp their fucking shit.
Absolutely. You know, I am worried about the way that this can empower or embolden, people who just have this pent up rage, who are weak-minded and cowards. Does this signal to them? Is this some kind of dog whistle that they are allowed now to take out their anger on children who don't even know if they're doing something wrong in the first place, right? So a child may do something wrong, and violence is not the answer, but then you've got a child who has no idea what's going on, and then violence is put on them. So, Kelly, I want to ask you, is this legislation likely to become an outlet for adults of lesser quality when it comes to being in the classroom?
Gosh, you would hope not. I mean, the potential is there too, because they did lessen the qualifications to be a teacher in Oklahoma. So you have this ability to have this happen. And I'm afraid that something like that could happen, that you get somebody that has, my stepfather had Huntington's disease, and he was unable to control his temper. He even if he tried, he couldn't control it. It was just something that happened. So you get people that in this position, and Huntington's doesn't even start taking effect with most people until they're in their late 30s or 40s. So they could be a good teacher for 10 years, and all of a sudden, boom, they start beating kids because they can't control it anymore. So that's another thing that you'd have to watch out for, not just somebody who's messed up in the head to begin with, but that somebody that gets progressively worse because of a mental illness.
That's right.
So I go ahead, Jimmy. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time. I have a hard time with this subject. So
I know that you do, and I think you brought up a great point, right? Oklahoma is not exactly the mecca for scholars to enter the classroom now, is it? And I'm not talking about the kids, but just in the past couple of years, they have lessened, like you said, Kelly, lessened the requirements to become a teacher. You don't even need a bachelor's degree anymore. Not to say that a bachelor's degree makes you any smarter than anyone else, but the training to do that is more attainable for people who have no business being in that atmosphere, right? And so they don't require teaching certifications either. I mean, how easy is it for people to get in these classrooms that don't belong there? And I guess that's kind of a rhetorical question, but
because teaching isn't just knowing the subject you're teaching. Teaching is being able to interact with the children. Teaching is being able to keep the children under control. There's more to teaching than just knowing the subject.
Absolutely.
And we're opening up now teaching to people who don't have that training and that kind of experience. So it's troublesome.
Jason, I'd like to know your thoughts on what we just talked about before I move on.
It just keeps flashing in my mind. Stanford prison experiment. When you give untrained, unprepared people, uneducated people, positions of authority that involve the ability to use violence and force, it's a powder keg, and we see it time and time again. So we've seen it in the police, time and time again. It's a problem. It's like a thing, it's rare to hear about that with military folks. Military folks are trained. Military folks have prerequisites. They've got to be in certain type of shape. But we got people who are pretending they're military, walking around the streets a lot of times, and they're not ready and they're scared. So you start putting somebody but they get some training, but then you start putting somebody who's allowed to use physical force on a child, especially a child with disabilities. And if they don't have a bachelor's degree, how have they even been trained to deal and work with kids with disabilities? What do they know? What do they know about developmental education? I've got 10 years of college under my belt, multiple degrees, licenses, certifications. One of them degree in psychology, a degree, bachelor's of science in psychology with a focus on developmental psychology and neuropsychology. And the things I learned in those classes are invaluable in understanding kids' behaviors, especially kids who have disabilities. To think that my child would be in a place where some untrained, unlicensed, unprepared person is not only given the responsibility to teach my kid, but given the right and freedom and, dare say, in a Christian point of view, the privilege to harm my child, that is the most terrifying shit.
It's awful.
That I could think of. And in a country, again, I feel like this is a theme I bring up a lot. In a country, again, that values authority over autonomy, those kids are going to have already been conditioned by families and media and culture and environment that says, I deserve this. And
Well,
it's
especially
fucked.
in Christianity, right? I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
you are. Go ahead, Kelly. I
I'm
want
about
to
to
get to
say,
Kelly, and I
or
want to
it's-
switch gears here.
Or it's going to do exactly the opposite. It's going to teach these kids that if I get up and I say something, I'm going to get beaten back down. This is what authority is going to do to me, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. I agree.
This kid in the
Yeah.
wheelchair that can't get away, who literally can't get away. He is physically stuck there while he's getting beaten. And believe me, that's a whole level of psychological torture piled on top of the physical torture. Believe me, I know for a
So
fact.
there's
Right? But maybe that kid is the next freaking top physicist. Maybe that kid is going to be an incredible author, right? He's going to write movies that people are going to enjoy, but now he's not going to because it was beaten the fuck out of him.
Well, there's a lot of layers here about how this is so wrong. We've definitely addressed the cowardice of adults to take out their anger. But what I want to move into is the essential building blocks of Christianity, if you will, because it has been propagated over centuries that people are bad, they deserve torture, they deserve to be treated with violence, right? And they deserve to have that done by the people in the positions of authority within that religion. Now, what we're seeing in Oklahoma is a gross violation of the Constitution because we have got Oklahoma government officials on the Oklahoma, in both houses of the Oklahoma legislature, openly advocating for implementing Christianity. And the result is violence against kids. Gentlemen, I want to ask you, how can we reflect, how can we take this topic and apply it to a violation of our constitutional rights?
Kelly, you want to go first?
He'd have to prove that it was religiously motivated, and I don't know if that's possible.
Well, I think you can. I think you can prove it's religiously motivated because empirical study after empirical study after empirical study. I've got them on my computer right now. I've got them in a library because of this shit. Empirical study shows that whenever this type of discipline is implemented, whenever you have discipline and programs like corporal punishment or abstinence-only programs, you see undesired outcomes. There's negative correlations.
I get that, Jason, but you didn't prove to me that it wasn't religiously motivated.
Well, because what else would it be motivated by? You can tie it directly.
Be just tradition.
Yeah, but what about
this
the
is
fact?
the tradition of our society? It doesn't have to be tied to religion, and
Kelly,
that's the problem.
Then at that point it evolves past religion, and then it goes into the field of what we call culturally acceptable beliefs. That's a bold word in your textbook. Culturally acceptable beliefs.
We're not talking about in a textbook. We're talking about in a courtroom.
But that's how you would use it, and there's empirical data that you can use to back how these things can be harmful and archaic.
I understand what you're saying, Jason. But what I'm saying doesn't seem to be hitting with you. Yes, it's a bad system. We can prove that it's a bad system. But you have to prove that when they passed this law, they passed it for religious reasons.
Well, Kelly,
that you can't do with the empirical data that you're talking about.
In the government, the proponents of this law are actively citing the Bible.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Like they are saying this is what we should be allowed to do because of what is in the Bible. And so I think that does kind of transcend strictly government operations and shows a gross violation of our constitutional rights by endorsing a religion.
It's not even a gross violation. It's treasonous and traitorous. What you're doing is a preferential treatment of a nuanced version of a religion by a very specific socio-cultural group in a certain region. Like it is regionally specific to a certain culture. I mean, if that's not preferential treatment over all religious interpretations, to me that's disgusting, and I think it's very specific, and you can see a pattern, you can build off of it and see the different people who believe these things are promoting them in their different pockets, and then generally these motherfuckers talk to each other and interact and share.
Here's the thing too.
I just think we have a higher standard that the courts have a higher standard with something like this, and that's why we have coaches. That's why we have coaches doing prayers on football fields.
I think the courts have lower standards, and that's a problem. And we talked about this in my last law course.
They have higher standards for the evidence that you need to win this case. That's what I mean.
Hey, Jason, he's got a point now, doesn't he? So we've got our And I'm going to be very careful because I was on one episode of the Nonprofits and I called him our Secretary of State, and I got completely eviscerated in the comments. Our Speaker of the House, there he is, folks. For those of you who like to point out my misspeaks, but our Speaker of the House is on the House floor reading from the Bible, praying, and not being held accountable. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think Kelly might have a point in the fact that, well, Jason, I agree, the standards are low, right? But that only means that it sways so far in the other direction for them to actually be convinced that what's happening is a violation of the Constitution. Kelly, how did I do there?
Yeah, that was good. And maybe not just convinced, but swayed to give up what they believe with all their hearts, right? And it's not. And Jason, I totally agree with you with that data. I totally agree with that. I think there's way better ways to deal with children than to hit them. You know, like when my kids threw temper tantrums, I threw one with them, and that stopped it.
Well, you know, what this reminds me of is opposition against queer people and queer marriage. There's no fucking reason why anybody would oppose that except for religious motivation. Yeah, I mean, it's so silly. There's no scientific backing. There's no social fucking damage to it. So you reverse it and you see something like this, and I can't help. I don't know. I don't know. And the reason I said it's lower than my standard is that, like it was discussed in the last law course that I took before I got my degree, was that they value things like a priori and precedent over empiricism and repeated data. That's a problem. And just now, I mean, maybe in the past 15 years, when it comes to like, it's just, I don't know, from what I've learned and what I've experienced and what I see, all the way from compass sentencing software to, I don't know, I could start ranting, but I don't think the law and the way things happen, I think it's exactly what you're saying. It's fucking public opinion and sway and confirmation bias, and has nothing to do with the fucking truth. It disgusts me.
So, though there is something else that I think is incredibly alarming. They're not even trying to hide it. They're not even trying to mask it.
I mean, dude, yeah, man.
They are out in public. Their records are being kept. They're out there quoting the Bible on an open floor, and there is no shame. And the children are not going to be the first victims. I mean, they're certainly not the least, right? But they're not going to be the first, and they're going to come for other people once they establish kind of their control, just like they've done in the past. They're going to come from members of other religions. They're going to come for atheists and women and other minority groups. And this is how it starts, with an attack on children. So I'd like to get your comments on that thought, gentlemen, and then we can close out.
Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, I feel like the attack's already happening.
Yeah, let's not forget they're already allowed to hit students, right? So,
well, I mean, you're already allowed to fucking marginalize people and discriminate. You know, you're allowed to do these things. What I think happened is that, you know, possibly a certain political figure who behaves a certain way did a good job representing a bunch of fucking shitty people, and now they're emboldened. And now people have been left unchecked because people who believe in things like peace and pacifism, you know, think, you know, maybe if I'm a reasonable, logical human being, I can reason and logic and fix things. But the problem is there's seems to be a lot more people who are swayed by fucking trash and really want to behave that way. And it's sad because those motherfuckers have a lot of money and a lot of resources and a lot of connections, and are propped up in a place of authority, and then say the right words and wave a fucking Bible around, and somehow they're elected in and or given a bunch of money. I don't know. I think I don't have much hope, and I do think it's just getting more and more brazen, because good people do good things, and generally those good things don't involve barging your way into everybody's fucking brain and trying to indoctrinate them. So,
and beating your religion into them, right?
And beating your fucking beliefs into them. I don't know. I'm not a pacifist, but I think the best way to be is probably a pacifist. So I don't know. I don't know. It breaks my fucking heart, and I don't see it getting any better anytime soon.
Kelly, thoughts?
I got the religion beat out of me. It was,
I mean, yeah.
Religion was associated with my stepfather. He was the one that made me go to church. So, you know, and And I just, I, I feel for the kids that are going to suffer from this. I know that they, like you said, they're already allowed to do it in Oklahoma. We can only hope and pray that most teachers don't. That most teachers are intelligent enough to understand that beating children is the last resource of the incompetent, right, to steal a phrase. But like, there's so many other ways to deal with children than beating them. Like I said, they don't know a whole lot about the world. You can use that to your advantage. You can use that short attention span to your advantage. You just have to be smarter than the kids. And how hard is it to be smarter than a 7-year-old?
Yeah. So I want to kind of take a different approach real quick and just ask you guys, with the Bible being quoted in the Oklahoma House and Senate and then being used to support a law that would generally lead to the overall harm of children, can we consider the Bible a form of hate speech? Jason, what do you think?
I don't know. I think something like that is benign. I'm also have a weird opinion on art and literature, things like comedy, anything like that. Like, I really feel like anything should more or less be allowed, because what it is, it's like a model. It's not the real thing. It's a model. It's a representation of an idea. So I catch a lot of shit for this, but I'm okay with pretty much any idea being presented. I'm okay with it being presented in any way they want to do it, even if it's ways that offend people. That's how I feel about art. The thing is this, though, once you take that art and you weaponize it, it's not the art that's doing it. It's the human being and the structure around it. So by blaming words on paper, to me, is missing the whole point, and you're missing what's really happening. And what's really happening is you have groups of people that you can identify by name that are doing fucked up things. And we can blame the Bible all day. I can write a bunch of fucked up words on a piece of paper, but if somebody can do what they want with it, it's not my fault.
Real short, yes. If there were still Amorites and Amalekites and Babylonians around, it is definitely hate speech.
Oh yeah, that's different.
Well, we're gonna close this segment out, but I can't do so without referencing Jason's point about comedy. And I want to quote Chris Rock when he said, there are just some professions you can't be bad at, right? And I think the teacher is one of them, right? Teachers are undervalued in our society, and they deserve more. And when we continue to undervalue them, we're going to see them go away, and we're going to get the ranks filled with people who just don't belong there. And so I want to thank everybody.
Of course, a teacher would tell us that.
Yeah, true. I teach 1 day a week, so don't put the full title on me. But yeah, great discussion. This was a wonderful segment, and everybody, thanks for tuning in. Click the link below to see more.